Members of the gentleman from North Carolina seek recognition.
I have an amendment at the desk, Mr. Chairman.
The clerk will report the amendment.
Amendment offered by Mr. Hudson of North Carolina. At the end of the bill, before the short title, insert the following section. None of the funds made available by this act may be used to treat any M855 5.56 millimeter times 45 millimeter or SS-109 type ammunition as armor-piercing ammunition for purposes of Chapter 44 of Title 18 United States Code.
Pursuant to House Resolution 287, the gentleman from North Carolina and a member opposed each will control 5 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentleman from North Carolina.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First and foremost, I want to voice my strong opposition to the Obama administration's continued assaults on our Second Amendment rights. I ran for Congress to stand up against this overreach and to keep Washington's bureaucrats' influence out of our lives and their hands off our freedoms and their hands off our guns. That's why I'm offering an amendment to the Commerce, Justice, Science Appropriations Bill that would stop President Obama's green tip ammo ban. As you recall, the ATF recently tried to ban common rifle ammunition that has been illegally used by law-abiding American sportsmen for decades. It was only after receiving intense pressure from Congress and more than 80,000 public comments and, frankly, the direct intervention of Chairman Culberson that the administration stalled their proposed ban. But as the clock ticks down on this president's second term, the administration is cooking up more than a dozen gun control regulations and have left the door open to reconsider future ammo bans. This determination to unconstitutionally restrict one of our most fundamental rights, and I would argue our first freedom, has nothing to do with safety or security and everything to do with government control. My amendment, previously introduced as a standalone bill by my good friend and colleague, Chief Deputy Whip Patrick McHenry from North Carolina, would put an end to this attack on our Second Amendment rights by ensuring this popular ammunition remains available and not subject to any future ATF bans. Mr. Chairman, like many of my constituents from North Carolina, I like to spend time outdoors in a deer stand, in the field, or at the range. I will not stand idly by and allow a unilateral executive fiat to threaten our right to enjoy this cherished American tradition. But the Second Amendment is not about hunting or shooting sports. Our right to keep and bear arms is a right that ensures our ability to protect all of our rights. That's why I refer to it as our first freedom. This fundamental freedom must be defended and protected. For that reason, I encourage my colleagues in the House to support this amendment. And at this time, Mr. Chairman, I would yield the balance of my time to my colleague from North Carolina, Mr. Rouser.
Gentleman from North Carolina.
Mr. Chairman, I'm proud to stand with my colleague from North Carolina in support of this amendment. In the eyes of our founding fathers, the right to bear arms was just as fundamental as the freedom of speech. The Second Amendment ensures our right as law-abiding American citizens to bear arms to protect ourselves from enemies, both foreign and domestic. It is no secret that our Second Amendment rights have been threatened by the government bureaucrats in the Obama administration. Earlier this year, the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives doubled down on attempting to ban lead projectiles as they claim the ammunition is armor-piercing. They proposed a ban on the manufacturing and sale of certain AR-15 ammunition that could have drastically reduced the availability of ammunition commonly used for sporting and other legitimate purposes. Because of the strong objections from gun owners and constitutional conservatives across the country, ATF decided to table their proposal, at least for now. Mr. Chairman, our constitutional rights should not be left up to the whims of federal bureaucrats in Washington. This amendment simply ensures that federal funds cannot be used to ban certain types of commonly used ammunition, and I encourage my colleagues to support it. I yield back my time.
Does the gentleman from North Carolina reserve?
I reserve balance of my time.
Gentleman from Pennsylvania, for what purpose does the gentleman from Pennsylvania rise?
I rise in opposition.
Gentleman from Pennsylvania is recognized.
They must have some special kind of deer in North Carolina. They're running around in the woods with bulletproof vests on. The idea that a sportsman needs an armor-piercing bullet to go after deer, I mean, I don't really buy it, but if you're willing to, if the majority is willing to buy it at this hour of the night, it's fine with me. On a serious note, for those who are in law enforcement, who are out in dark alleys and who have to confront circumstances that they don't know the exact dangers that they're going to face. The fact that we want to have weapons that suppress the sound, now we want to have bullets that can pierce armor, and that we want to make sure that under the guise of the Second Amendment, that you can have all manner of armament, without any type of reasonable speed bumps that might protect the American public, is something that I'm not sure that the majority would want to take such an enthusiastic effort around. But obviously they do, and they decided that this bill is the bill for it, that this bill is the place where they want to do this activity, right? And I think it's unfortunate, but as for me and for my side, we'll be in opposition, and we'll let the majority work its will. I yield
May I
to
inquire
the
how much
chairman
time
if necessary.
Gentleman from North Carolina is recognized.
May I inquire how much time is remaining?
The gentleman from North Carolina has 1.5 minutes.
Well, let me just say very briefly before I yield to my
And
chairman.
the time on my side?
And the gentleman from Pennsylvania has 3 minutes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate my colleagues' questions, rhetorical question, and Mr. Chairman, I would just say that the point is a 5.556 green tip bullet is not an armor-piercing bullet. The only reason it's been called an armor-piercing bullet is because of a loophole, and that's my point. We have an administration who's just put out a whole list of regulations that say they want to restrict the rights of people because they may or may not have a mental illness. They want a whole list, a whole range of regulations that they'd like to roll out in the final days of this administration to limit, to infringe upon our Second Amendment rights. And what I'm saying is we're not going to stand for that. And so the bullet, the round that I'm talking about is not an armor-piercing round. It's never been defined as an armor-piercing round, but because of a loophole, this administration tried to ban it as such. And having said that, I would yield the balance of my time to the chairman.
Gentleman yields to the gentleman from Texas.
Thank you. I want to express my very strong support for the gentleman's amendment. The gentleman's amendment is necessary because the ATF did come out with a very broad legal framework within which they were attempting to ban not only .223 ammunition, but potentially whole other categories of ammunition. And that is just not what the statute was intended to prevent. The statute was intended to prevent specific types of armor-piercing bullets from being used in pistols. And ATF was taking that far beyond the statute. It was necessary for, as new subcommittee chairman, I was able to step in and persuade the ATF to drop their ammo ban. Mr. Hudson's amendment is necessary to make sure it doesn't happen again in the future, and I urge members to support his amendment in the strongest possible terms to defend our Second Amendment rights.
Gentleman's time has expired. From Pennsylvania.
I would just hope that none of my good friends on the other side decide to test this theory about whether or not it can pierce armor, all right? That you don't take the rhetoric to an extreme here, right? It is a fact that there's some concern about what this means for law enforcement. And I know that the majority would want to be seen, and I think truly is, in support of law enforcement. Why we would want to put this type of ammunition in guns that we want to suppress the sound on, in which we want less information about the purchase of from, at a time like this in our nation, I don't actually understand. But there's obviously some thread that runs through the other team over here that suggests that this is the time for them to proceed along this line. And I think that the American public will have to make whatever judgment they want to make about that, and I yield back the remainder of my time.
The gentleman yields back. The question is on the amendment offered by the gentleman from North Carolina. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed say nay. No. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it. The amendment is agreed to.